Hi folks, Andy here, free from that video editor that appeared in the last short. Long story short, but I've been messing around with a video editor, or at least I've got my daughter to help me out with it because I don't really know that much about tech and she's pretty good at these things. She's only 12 years old and she's way ahead of me using things on phones anyway. I'm starting to lose my hair a bit at the front. It's getting very thin now. Like, it doesn't look so much when it's dry like this, but when it's wet, it is starting to look thin at the front and a little bit at the back. And sort of playing with the idea of whether I should just have like a standard middle-aged man's haircut or just shave it all off and make it all, go cold turkey with it. So experimenting with what I'd look like and trying to get used to, silly as it sounds, I guess it's when you've had long hair for years like I have, and then you go from long hair to like no hair. It's going to be a bit of a shock. So trying to muck around with filters and see what I'd look like to a certain degree without hair. For the inevitable removal of, said hair. But anyway, waffle on about me there. Talking next about Shaun Hutson. I was going to do Bentley Little, and I am going to go into Bentley Little. I'm probably going to get Bentley Little books intersected with Shaun Hutson books. But the reason why I decided to go to Shaun Hutson next is due to the fact that I've actually got some stuff to share that I want to share with people about Shaun, and I'm going to be doing a full review series, not on every book he's wrote, because Shaun's wrote not only loads of books, but it's really hard to keep track of the books he has wrote because of the amount of pseudonyms he's got. He's wrote that many books under that many different names, and even we're tracking down a whole bunch of stuff. I'm not quite sure what the first book was that he wrote or anything. I mean, his first book of note, I guess, is Slugs, but he also wrote The Skull at the same time and a bunch of other things. So it's a complete rabbit hole of stuff. Anyway, Shaun Hutson, in many ways, is the guy who took over the mantle of British horror from James Herbert. When James Herbert started to sort of like experiment a bit more in the 80s, Shaun appeared, and his early books are very reminiscent of James Herbert's early stuff. They're short, they're sharp, they're very violent, lots of gore, sex, mythology, very fast-paced. But he was a very good, very gifted writer, even from a young age. So, his stuff that he did when he was young was really, really good. And then, like James, he kind of got interested in counter-terrorism and sort of thrillers and stuff, and he started branching out, and he's done a whole bunch of books that initially I was put off because they weren't creature feature horrors, but they were really, really good books at the same time. And more recently, he's coming back. He's got a book coming out in, I believe, March this year, 2026. It's his first full-length novel in 6 years, and I believe he's still writing not only a third Slugs book, which will either be out this year or next year, but also potentially playing with a sequel to Erebus, which is one of my favourite books of his. So he's also doing full-on horror and sort of thriller as well, with horror elements to them. Shaun's never been afraid to write sort of no punches pulled horror. Some of it is particularly gruesome, shocking, downright offensive to some people, I guess, but that's all part of the fun of horror, to remove taboos. He's got things in some of his books that are, up there with the most demented of Richard Lehman, but for my money, he's got that sort of very easy to read flow that Lehman had, with Herbert's more sort of colourful use of language and descriptive power. And just a really, really good author. What I like really about Shaun is that his lack of any sort of pretense. He's such a down-to-earth, likeable guy. And I actually implore you to find some of the interviews he's talked about, especially one where he was conducting an interview on TV late at night, and it involves a toilet and a chainsaw. It's particularly funny. He's a really down-to-earth guy as well. Like in his books, whereas a lot of people give thanks to certain things, he's given thanks to football teams and Iron Maiden and stuff. And I can really relate to a lot of what he talks about. Really likeable guy who writes a lot of stuff that's even shocked him. I think it's Nemesis. He opens it up with a disclaimer about how he thinks, potentially he pushed himself too far with what he wrote, and it's downright horrific and disgusting. But at the same time, it's an itch he had to scratch, and it's that sort of thing again where you've got to be able to separate the artist from the art, in the same way that Layman tended to be pigeonholed because he always wrote about sort of like sexual violence and stuff. Sort of Hutson writes a lot of really icky things, and he's wrote some really disturbing stuff, but he's more versatile than Layman in that sense. And again, he's pushed the boat out with stuff that's even made me gag a few times, which is quite an achievement and good. So well, I think he's a really underrated British horror author. Like I say, he got started in the early 80s, although he was writing in the 70s. And throughout most of his career, he's kind of always played second fiddle to big name authors. You don't see Shaun Hutson books in mass market paperback shops or anything these days. And a lot of his early stuff's hard to get a hold of. It's all out of print and things. You've probably got better luck with the Kindle stuff or the second-hand stuff. But I think he's a massively underrated author, and I actually got into him really late. I knew who he was very much early into my horror reading career, but I just didn't, for whatever reason, connect with him. I guess I was so busy reading so many other bigger name horror authors that I just didn't feel like I needed to read his stuff, which is a bit of a shame, really, because his stuff's great. I'm not going to go through every book he's wrote. Like I say, it's hard to track down some of it, and there's so much, but I am going to give a generalisation of some of his books. I'm going to go from his very early stuff, in fact, from what I believe is his earliest stuff, to culminating with his most modern, which by the time I finish this series, his newest book should be out, and talk about books that I just genuinely really like that he's wrote in some sort of retrospective order from earliest to latest. So it's not going to be massively comprehensive. It's not going to have all of them, but it's going to have enough so that if you like Shaun Hutson, hopefully it'll be interesting for you to see my opinions on it. And if you've never read Hutson, or you've only dipped your toes in the Hutson water, to speak, it will hopefully give you a good understanding of why I like his particular style of horror, how it's evolved over the years, and recommendations from his earliest to his latest work. And we'll finish it off, hopefully, with a review of his latest book, Hollow Point, which I'm very excited about. But that's it for now. Shaun Hutson, up next, as they say. Take care of yourselves and look after each other.